Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Cassie Holmes. I am the LSAMP Project Director at Valencia College. LSAMP stands for the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation Program. It is a NSF funded program that's specifically focused on supporting underrepresented minority students in obtaining a bachelor's degree in the STEM fields. On a personal note, I have a master's degree in environmental education from NYU, and I've also worked in the sustainability sector. So I'm really excited to be here and to be your Zoom host to kind of kick things off and get started with our panel. So thank you so much for joining us. This is being offered as part of Valencia College's Office of Sustainability's 10-year anniversary. So the office is turning 10 years old and is celebrating this conference. The conference runs until today and addresses topics ranging from sustainability in our community, in higher education, to environmental justice and sustainability perspectives from public policy, science, and technology. Hopefully you've had some time to attend the other sessions earlier this week. So as you know, this is being recorded. And this will be available after the conference as well, and you'll be able to access the recordings. So this is a reminder for our Valencia College students. As you attend sessions, you'll actually be entered into drawings for prizes. And the more sessions you attend, the more chances you have to win prizes. So there are things like portable solar chargers and an iPad and a stasher bag. I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds very cool. So just keep attending sessions, and you have to be actively enrolled as a Valencia College student in order to be eligible. So as you know, we're here for sustainability, right? And this is one of the more common, kind of well-known definitions of sustainability, which is really focused on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Throughout this conference, we've been looking at sustainability and what it means to live and work using our finite resources responsibly so that we don't jeopardize the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. At Valencia, the mission for sustainability, the office is really focused on promoting and executing operational practices in the service of environmental, economic, and social responsibility for current and future generations. The vision of the Office of Sustainability at Valencia is to serve as a role model in our local community. One way to summarize all of this is the triple bottom line, which emphasizes the three areas of environmental, economic, and social responsibility, or another way is the 3 Ps: people, planet, and prosperity. These are some of the core areas that the Office of Sustainability focuses on at Valencia College. So waste and recycling, energy, water, transportation, grounds, and food. We're proud of being here 10 years later, the 10-year anniversary of the Office of Sustainability. It was created in fall 2011 with the hiring of the very first sustainability director, Dr. Deborah Green, who is an environmental science faculty member at Valencia. And over 10 years, Valencia has accomplished many things with regards to sustainability. We went from having 1 green certified building to now having 12. We've improved and expanded the recycling efforts college-wide, including winning recycling competitions, as well as increased energy efficiency, saving millions of dollars for the college through both mechanical and behavioral changes, just to name a few. We want to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who has been part of the journey for the Sustainability Office. None of this would be possible or accomplished without the support of the students, the faculty, the staff, and the administration. So thank you to everyone who has been involved with sustainability at Valencia, whether it was 10 years ago or you're joining today for the first time. So when reflecting in the past 10 years and looking ahead in the future, 10 years from now, what do we hope to accomplish with regards to sustainability? These are the objectives. So The three primary objectives are obtaining carbon neutrality for 2050, reducing the waste that the college actually generates, and improving water conservation and stormwater management. The largest goal that Valencia has is carbon neutrality, and it encompasses energy efficiency and conservation, renewables, and addressing our transportation-related emissions. So for our students, faculty, staff, these are some of the fantastic ways that you can get involved with sustainability initiatives at Valencia. There is a club that I believe Professor Adamski, who's one of our speakers, is very involved in and leads. There's also SGA and various ways to join clubs at your own campuses. There are opportunities to be food waste champions to assist with our food waste recycling program and education program at East and West. You can also join our Tree Campus Higher Education Committee, which helps provide input to tree care on campus and plantings. Keep up to date by following what we're doing on Instagram and Facebook, and you can always contact the Office of Sustainability for more information and for ideas for how to get involved. So now I am very pleased to present our session moderator for today, Dr. Lisa Macon. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Macon, and then she's going to take over our session and introduce our panelists. So Dr. Macon holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from Hofstra University, a master's degree in computer science from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, a master's degree in math, and a PhD in math from UCF. She previously worked as a software developer for Exxon, Citibank, and Sony Corporation, as well as a quality assurance manager and project director for the Associated Press. Dr. Macon has taught math and computer science courses at Valencia and UCF since 1997. Her husband also teaches math at Valencia. She is originally from New York, has 3 children, loves the New York Mets, no surprise there being from New York, plays guitar, and enjoys reading and playing video games. So please put in the chat, you're welcome to Dr. Macon. And Dr. Macon, I'm going to pass the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you so much, Cassie. And thank you for this wonderful introduction to what we do here at Valencia with sustainability. I'm sure all of our participants really appreciate all of that wonderful information. And I know you'll have some to share at the end as well. So I'm going to get started by introducing our 4 panelists. And as I introduce them, hopefully you'll be able to locate them in the gallery view or scrolling along whatever view that you have so you can recognize them when they answer the questions. So with us today, we have 4 panelists. And the first one I'll introduce is Caroline Chamanix. Caroline is Program Manager to Fleet Farming and Chief Operations Officer of Ideas for Us. She has a degree in Landscape and Horticulture Technology from Valencia College, wonderful institution, and a bachelor's degree in Environmental Studies and Sustainable Urbanism from Rollins College. She was horticultural specialist and live-in caretaker to Nerling Gardens, a historic botanical garden in Gotha, Florida, for 4 years. Welcome, Caroline.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's Caroline. The second panelist I'll introduce is Christy Folk. Christy Folk is the director of Fridays for Future Orlando, where she advocates for climate action. She also works as a community composter with O-Town Compost and has managed organic gardens since 2014. She was trained as a climate reality leader by Al Gore and has years of experience as a science educator. She holds a bachelor's degree in environmental science and merges her love of musical theater and activism by writing song parodies and making music videos when she isn't working or volunteering. And her pronouns are she, they. And I hope we get to learn more about where to find some of these song parodies and music videos before the end of our session today, because I'd really like to check that out. Thanks for being here with us today, Christy. Our third panelist I'll introduce is Markel Ogletree. Markel is a sophomore at University of Florida and has been an active participant with the CLEO Institute, especially for government-related initiatives in Tallahassee. And I'm sure we'll learn more about what those initiatives are through the course of our panel today. So welcome, Markel. Thanks for joining us. And last but certainly not least, we have Professor James C. Adamski, who is a fellow faculty member of mine at Valencia's East Campus and president of Friends of the Wokaiba River. He is a licensed professional geologist with more than 30 years of experience conducting water resources studies, particularly related to groundwater and springs. He's a full-time professor of geology at Valencia College's East Campus, best job ever, his words, but also mine, where he also serves as advisor to the Valencia Earth Studies Association, VISA, a student environmental club, and mentors students conducting undergraduate research. Prior to Valencia, he worked for the U.S. Geological Survey and as a consultant. Friends of the Wokaiba River is a local environmental organization advocating for the protection and enjoyment of the Wokaiba River and its springs. Jim has been on its board since 2013, and in May 2021, he was elected president. Welcome, Jim, and thanks to everybody for being here today. I would really appreciate you're taking the time to share all of your knowledge and what's going on in the community organizations that you serve with our students. So I have some questions I'm going to ask. And of course, we want to hear from all of you for each question. So I'm going to put them in the chat, and whoever wants to go first, we're just going to make this very informal. So whoever feels the passion to jump in first, please do that. And I'll make sure that all 4 panelists have the opportunity to answer. So the first question I have for you, which is going in the chat right now, is what do each of you see as the most pressing environmental issues threatening our community right now and in the future?
Awesome, I'll get started.
Great.
So with Ideas for Us, an environmental nonprofit that has, branches in Florida and internationally as well, we kind of broke it down into 5 focus areas: energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. And these focus areas all have pressing concerns in the Florida environment. When it comes to our reliance on fossil fuels and trying to promote renewable energy instead. That's something that I know that Christy works a lot with the different climate action groups. With water, when we're talking about conservation and quality, when we consider maybe in the future having a water crisis, how do we prepare for that? What are some of the things that we do as a community to mitigate some water issues that we might be having from leaking septic tanks or agricultural runoff, right? With food, it's something that we're all involved with, which is the reliance on the global industrial food system that we have. And instead maybe we'll get to some of the solutions, but considering other pathways of having food in your lives. Waste is the massive waste problem that we have. We have a single-use culture here in Florida. I think it got worse with COVID and having, single-use masks and gloves and all these things, and not being able to have our bulk stores as much, or have, opportunities for us to be reusing silverware. It became more of a reliance on plastic, which is a huge problem, on top of other waste, issues that we have from construction waste with new construction rather than historic preservation, etc. And then for us, the last thing is ecology. And it's really, this urban sprawl, this land grab that has been part of the Florida history for years. People seen it as a place where they can, develop and create neighborhoods. And it's great, right? Because we probably all live in a sort of development. But as we're kind of chipping away at the native lands of Florida, it's something that I think that groups, individuals, businesses, etc., we need to consider, what do we do to help preserve wild Florida, right? How long do we have left until these natural spaces are, compromised? So those 5 focus areas are things that we focus on, but I know that there's also other concerns that are, in the press and relevant to our areas. And I'll yield to the other members of this group to kind of talk about that.
I'd love to jump in next. I work with Fridays for Future Orlando. That's my main climate activist group, and I've done a lot of work with Ideas for Us with Caroline. And so, as Fridays for Future Orlando, let me just kind of briefly explain that kind of movement in case anyone's not familiar. So Fridays for Future is a school climate strike movement started by Greta Thunberg, who was a Swedish teenager. And she started striking from school, so leaving school to sit in front of the Swedish parliament to demand climate action, because she saw that action was not being taken in response to the top scientists of the world issuing these warnings about this impending climate crisis. And so this movement, this climate strike movement, was started where kids would leave school to demand action and claim, we don't have a future, so why are we studying for one to be a scientist, and people don't believe in science and don't make decisions based on science. So that's kind of the emergence of the Fridays for Future movement. Fridays for Future Orlando is a group that organizes climate strikes. So we basically go out in front of City Hall and demand that our elected officials treat this crisis like a crisis and follow the science, listen to the science. And so in our eyes, the most pressing environmental issue is this overall climate crisis that we're facing. And that has so many consequences and so many issues within that overall climate crisis, overarching climate crisis window. So that includes things like extreme weather events that happen as a response of in response to a warming world that has more energy in its system, and things like threats to our food and water system that Caroline mentioned that result from changes in the climate as far as droughts and additional rainfall. And I can go more into the science later. But there are so many environmental issues within the climate crisis movement, in addition to all of the environmental issues that are either localized, like clean water, clean air, things like that, plastic in the oceans. So there's a whole lot, but I would say the overall umbrella that Fridays for Future focuses on is the climate crisis, and that being specifically caused by the use of fossil fuels. And so that's one of my organizations I'm involved with, is Fridays for Future Orlando. The other one I'm going to talk about is O-Town Compost. And so this is the job that I work for right now. And so our goal with O-Town Compost is to focus on the pressing environmental issue of food waste. And so right now, our food, if we're not composting our food, it gets sent to the landfill. About 20% of what gets sent to the landfill is actually food, and about a third of our food in the United States is wasted. Either it goes bad on the way to the grocery store, or people just throw it away after they buy it because it goes bad or they don't use it, things like that. So a huge portion of what we produce as food in the United States isn't used, and that's a huge loss economically. But also on the back end, once that gets sent to the landfill, it doesn't break down. So the way landfills work is all of that food, all of that trash, everything that gets sent is laid out, and then basically every day they put a layer of dirt on top of all of that trash that was delivered to the landfill to keep all those smells in and keep all the pests out and everything. But what this does is it creates anaerobic conditions. So the oxygen and the airflow isn't going through all of those things. So it breaks down anaerobically, which means the microbes come in and break it down really slowly. So you can have like food waste that goes into the landfill all mixed with all that trash that just doesn't break down, along with the plastic and paper. It just is kind of mummified, we call it. And so when that happens, when it breaks down anaerobically, it produces a potent greenhouse gas called methane. And methane is, overall, it's 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And in the first 20 years, it's about 86 times more potent than carbon dioxide as far as greenhouse gases go. And greenhouse gases are what's responsible for trapping heat inside our atmosphere and leading to global warming, which is disrupting the climate system and leading to climate change. And so our goal is, as O-Town Compost, is to get everyone to compost their food scraps and keep those from going to the landfill, and also to divert those things and turn them into usable soil amendment that we can return to local agriculture. Because not only are we contributing to the climate crisis when we send our food scraps to the landfill, but we are also not getting those nutrients back into our food system. And that is what allows us to grow more food and have healthy soil, which we're actually depleting at a much higher rate than it can naturally be restored. So in those two positions with Fridays for Future Orlando and with O-Town Compost, those are kind of two of the issues that I aim to tackle. And I'll go ahead and let somebody else share more on this.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, I can jump in now. My name is Markel Ogletree, and I am a part of CLEO, a youth empowerment movement for climate mobilization. And what CLEO really focuses on doing is education for youth, but also adults, and just recognizing that the climate crisis is serious, and like we're experiencing the effects of it right now, and we'll continue experiencing them in the near future. And along with that, CLEO works to mobilize youth and empower them to be advocates. So there's a lot of like local work students can do as far as contacting like local city commissioners and like making sure their local representatives are held accountable, but also on a state level, ensuring that we have like legislation to mitigate climate issues and promote resiliency. So I've been working with CLEO for about 2 years now. And one of the issues, as I'm going to echo what Christy was saying about a pressing environmental issue, is just the impact of climate change, because there's so many intersecting issues related to that. So one thing I've been researching a lot and kind of been educating students on is like the effect of heat, extreme heat and just extreme temperatures, but especially extreme heat, because there's a lot of connections to agriculture, and like our food output will change due to extreme temperatures, but also there's a lot of health effects. So for humans, so for people who don't have access to air conditioning, there's a lot of serious health effects that can be experienced, and people who work outside and don't have like proper protections. That's, you know, a humanitarian issue. And then there's also issues related to food insecurity. I'm from Tallahassee, and that's an issue that we're trying to work on right now, because there's a clear divide between people who have access to food and then people living in food deserts who have insecure food sources. So we've been working to kind of create like a community gardens to ensure people have access, but then also just considering like the disproportionate effect that climate change will have on people who are the least contributors to the climate crisis. That's another big issue we're trying to tackle. So just ensuring that we hold the most powerful people and corporations accountable, and ensure that we have equitable mitigation for people who are unable to, fight for themselves.
Great, thank you.
Okay, wow, that's basically just going to echo what everybody else already said. That was great. I would put down that, yeah, climate change is the #1 issue, not just facing Central Florida, but all of humanity, because it does touch on so many different aspects of our lives, from not only ecosystems, which is a big part, but also water availability, water resources, national security, social justice issues. And so, it is basically defining our future. And here in Central Florida, we are seeing a little bit of heat increase. Today is going to be 91 degrees, which is anonymously warm. There's a great website called Climate Reanalyzer. You can go on there every day and see what global temperatures are like. And right now there is a big blob of warm mass air covering the eastern United States, and we're part of it. But it also has, here in Central Florida, has a big effect on water resources. We are already seeing issues with water resources because the amount of people living in Central Florida, probably 95% of our drinking water and other water comes from groundwater. And so we're seeing that the aquifer is declining over time. Over the last 50 years or so, it's declined several feet. And we see that in a decrease in the spring discharge and Wokaiba Springs, Rock Springs, and some of the other springs. But also some research that I did with some students last year indicated that wet seasons are getting wetter. The wet season goes from June 1st to September 30th, and dry seasons are getting drier. So it's the median rainfall is not changing much, but the distribution of rainfall is changing. And I suspect, maybe we're having heavier rains now than we used to. And so it may ultimately have an impact on how that aquifer is being recharged. And then also, I think Caroline mentioned it, ecosystems is a very important thing. We got habitat loss with all the development going on here in Central Florida. And then also invasive species. So even the areas that we are preserving, a lot of them are being dominated by invasive species. Behind my house is a conservation area, and there are a number of invasive species back there, particularly one called skunk vine, which I'm continually battling. It covers trees. It will eventually cover them so much that it will kill them. And so it's nothing eats it. It's a very noxious plant. I try to go up and pull it out, and it's called skunk vine for a reason. It really smells badly. Yeah, exactly. So those are a couple of the issues that I look at with students, and that we're trying to look at with Friends of the Wokaiba River. And Friends of the Wokaiba River, we are basically concerned about all things Wokaiba, whether it's the groundwater, the springs, the river, the ecosystems. And also, try to make Wokaiba accessible to people so that they can enjoy it and learn more about the ecosystems and want to protect it. So I think that covers it. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you all for those very frightening issues that we have to tackle, but it's better that we get that out and we know what we're dealing with so that we can try to affect some change. And that leads me to the second question, which has been addressed by some of you while answering the first question, but that's okay. But feel free to add to your answers if you'd like, or provide more information if there is any more to provide. But the second question is, what is your organization doing to try to mitigate these issues?
Awesome. I'll go first. So Ideas for us is all about environmental education and action. So we don't want to just talk about it. We want to do something hands-on that directly is providing some sort of solution to the problem. And we do that through a monthly event called the Ideas Hive that brings together community members, subject matter experts to talk about relevant issues in our community that are related to environmental, topics. And at the end of the month, we engage in an eco action project. Well, since we're a group of really active people, staff, volunteers, we have about 6 events every month that we welcome the community to come and to take direct action with us. We have 2 urban agriculture farming days called Fleet Farming Swarm Rides, where you can come with us on bicycles to travel around our farms in the Audubon Park community. You can learn about urban agriculture, get your hands dirty, listen to music, and it's super fun. We also have other eco action events related to energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. This can look like solar workforce training programs, trying to get people trained in the solar industry to encourage that, or small scale solar installations, like we lit up a pulse mural with solar panels. With water, we do cleanups. So it could be something like, canoes on the Wokaiba River together, cleaning up trash, beach cleanups, or other water conserving events. We do things related to waste, including, other types of cleanups, as well as waste audits. Sometimes we'll, jump in a dumpster to dissect it, to give feedback to the business owner upon their approval of what they can do to reduce some of the waste. And we work with groups like O-Town Compost, and we reuse their compost for agricultural means. So you're kind of closing the loop in the system. We do, different types of upcycling events, eco art, etc. And for ecology, kind of my favorite, we do native landscaping projects, we do massive tree plantings, we do pollinator gardens with Florida native plants, and other events such as shoreline restoration projects. So if you've ever seen a lake that people are mowing all the way down, we will create a native landscaping buffer around the littoral, area. And that's something that we can do to help with water quality and creating habitat. So if you're interested in that, I know we'll get to it later, how you can get involved, but check out Ideas for Us, because we do really have a lot of opportunities for people to take direct action. And we support other groups like Fridays for Future Orlando and climate activism groups who are, taking to the streets about climate change.
Great. Thanks.
I guess I'll jump in next since Caroline provided me that little transition. So what are we doing as Fridays for Future and O-Town Compost? I guess I'll start with O-Town. So as I talked a little bit about before in the last question, O-Town Compost is really trying to attack the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, specifically methane. And that, I think, is what really drew me to the company, is providing this climate solution that a lot of people don't think about methane as a greenhouse gas. When they think of greenhouse gas, they think of carbon dioxide. And that's reasonable, because carbon dioxide is probably about 80% of greenhouse gases, whereas methane is only about 10%. But it's the potency of the methane that makes it something that we want to target. And especially in the latest IPCC report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that's the top global scientists have told us in some of the most recent reports that methane is really what we want to target to reduce in order for us to achieve those short-term benefits of reducing the effects of the climate crisis right now. And so in order to do that, we have to really start thinking about compost. And so that's what we're doing, is we're trying to get all of our, not just residential, but like businesses on board. And so that's what we're doing as an organization. And then with Fridays for Future Orlando, we really want to pressure people in power who have decision-making abilities to choose these science-based routes that really respond to the crisis in an emergency fashion. So what are we doing to mitigate these issues? Well, we're educating people, we're getting more people involved with the movement, and we're really trying to push those people who are in power, who have the ability to make changes, to make those changes, because these issues are so systemic. And things like energy, pushing Mayor Dyer to support OUC transitioning to clean energy, for example, Orlando Utilities Commission, which is our local utility authority. And right now, they unfortunately have a goal of continuing to use fracked gas, aka natural gas, which is mostly methane, to continue to use this past 2050, and claiming that it'll be net zero and that they'll be able to offset their emissions with other technologies, carbon capture technologies that don't exist at scale yet. And so this is kind of, I think, an example of greenwashing by saying, yeah, we're doing better, we're slowly getting cleaner energy on board, but the scale of the crisis and the speed at which we must act is really the important factor here. Because if we had a few more decades, if we had until 2050 to go net zero, which is what a lot of goals are, then it would be easy, because that's 30 years from now. Making a transition in 30 years, you have plenty of time. But this is something that needs to happen yesterday. Like this isn't a crisis for the future. This is happening now. And just to give a little insight into the science, the IPCC quotes that 1.5 degrees Celsius of global heating above pre-industrial levels, so that's about 1850s when the Industrial Revolution started, that's the goal, is to keep global heating under that 1.5 degrees, because beyond that, the tipping points for the climate crisis are things like positive feedback loops that would make heating and other things like spiral out of control. Basically, it's like the point of no return. You can think of it like that. And things get much, much worse beyond that point. And we just don't know what the future is going to look like. And so we know that by keeping global heating under 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels would ensure us a chance to recover from the climate crisis, so to speak, and not completely change our world. And so right now we are at already about 1.1 degrees of warming of that 1.5 degrees warming goal. And it's not like we're at 0 and we have another 1.5 degrees. It's like we're at 1.1 of 1.5, and 1.5 is like the maximum we want to sustain for safe living conditions. And so we're already experiencing these effects. And so Fridays for Future is basically like educating people on the science and saying, here is the science, speaking truth to power, bringing the science to our elected officials and people who can alter the systemic, the way society functions systemically, which is really what's causing the problem, is the corporations and the fossil fuel companies that are producing the bulk of these emissions that are driving the crisis. So as Fridays for Future, we're small. It's generally young people who are raising their voices, even if they are below the voting age, and they're speaking truth to power, telling their elected officials the truth and that we need to take action. And so what I've been doing with Fridays for Future since we transitioned from when the pandemic kind of shut everything down and when we weren't able to do in-person climate strikes, we pivoted online. And so since the pandemic started in March of 2020, I've been doing climate strikes online. And so I will hold up my whiteboard sign. I'll write something climate related. Generally, I pick something from the climate news that week or some campaign that we're working on nationally or locally. And I'll just bring people's attention to it online and give them an action item. So like call your senators to tell them to support the Green New Deal or something like that. And it's really trying to get people I know involved, because I really believe in the butterfly effect and this idea that little changes can totally change, one thing you say to somebody might totally change their perspective on sustainability and how they live their lives. And it might kind of awaken something in them that they hadn't learned about in school, or they hadn't learned how to compost from their parents or anything like that. So my goal with Fridays for Future Orlando is really to get people thinking about these issues and to push the people who have power to make good decisions. And I'll just add one more thing to this. One of the things that I work on with Fridays for Future Orlando is trying to bring in my creative side. And so I personally enjoy writing song parodies. And so I've written a few about various environmental issues. And I think this is a good way to get people who might not otherwise be interested, kind of joining the movement in a fun way. And so, but I can talk more about those later, but that's just another thing that I work on with Fridays for Future Orlando to try to change people's minds in order to mitigate these issues. So thanks.
Change their hearts and change their minds, right? Yeah. All right. Thank you, Markel.
Yeah, so CLEO, as I mentioned before, is really pushes for climate education, but also action which is similar to Ideas for Us that Caroline mentioned. So one thing that CLEO tries to do is certify climate speakers. So students are educated on how to talk about climate change and climate issues to their peers, but also to elected officials. And through this way, it's like having an open dialogue of bringing climate change issues more to the public sphere, which I think is really important, because there's kind of, sometimes we don't always talk about these issues, or we don't know how to talk about them. So that's one primary piece. But then additionally, within the different CLEO chapters, so there's one in Miami, Orlando, Tampa, and then in Tallahassee, where I'm from, the CLEO organization tries to focus on action at a local level. So one of the policies pieces Gen CLEO tries to implement in local cities is a climate emergency declaration. I've been a part of writing the climate emergency declaration for Tallahassee, and we've been really working to get our city commissioners to adopt this policy because it serves as a recognition of how serious the climate crisis is and goals that we need to reach in order to prevent any adverse effects or any further adverse effects as far as adaptability in the future. So that's one policy or kind of piece that I've been working on as far as that. And then also just like having like online events has been one thing that we've been trying to do as far as getting students to like protest and kind of like show the advocacy part. So just getting students to use their voice and recognize that they do have, power as far as like an individual level. So getting other people to, change like their diet or maybe consumption choices, but then also looking at a larger scale because a lot of these issues are systemic, as Christy mentioned. So I'm trying to figure out how to bring these issues to the policy forefront and kind of create legislation.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. First, before I answer the question, I did want to clarify something that Christy said, because I see it put out quite a bit that, there are 10 companies that produce half the emissions or whatever. I've seen different statistics put out. I think it all came from an article in The Guardian a couple of years ago, and that's true. But you need to clarify that a bit. The companies are things like ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, Shell, Massey Energy, but 90% of those emissions are coming from product use. So it still basically comes down to us. There are, the average American produces about 16 metric tons of CO2 every year. That is 5.2 gigatons, billion tons of CO2 every year. Worldwide, roughly 38 to 40 gigatons are produced. So Americans, we produce an eighth of that. So I just am sometimes concerned that people kind of think that it's this, faceless corporation doing the damage, and it's not, personal. So just wanted to clarify that. As far as Friends of the Wokaiba go, yeah. So as far as Friends of the Wokaiba go, we do a lot of things. A lot of what we do is, unfortunately, fighting fires. We have several people, we have a technical committee, and several of us are continually looking at new developments being proposed and having to go in front of county board of commissioners and try to, if these developments are not environmentally friendly, do not meet there are certain requirements for the Wokaiba Basin, what developments need to do, the number of houses per acre, things like that, then we have to try to fight that. And, it's not necessarily glamorous work, but it's work that still needs to be done. We fought and successfully started to get septic tanks near Wokaiba Spring State Park transferred to sewer systems. So a few months ago, I went to a groundbreaking for a new pumping station, sewage pumping station near Wokaiba Spring State Park. It was an event called Septic to Sewer. So again, not maybe glamorous, but work that needs to be done. And then we meet with like utility corporations, we meet with DEP. There's one utility corporation, I don't want to name any names, but they've had a number of spills in our area, raw sewage spills. Not a good thing. So we've been meeting with DEP, trying to find a solution to that, and meeting with utility companies trying to find, and it's a tough issue because people need drinking water, but yet we're getting this decline in the aquifer. I mean, if I had my solution, reclaimed water, which is now used to water lawns, would be cleaned up a little bit more and be used for drinking water, but that's not politically acceptable right now, and it's not palatable to a lot of people as an idea. But what we also, again, try to do a lot of fun things. We try to educate people. We try to have fun. We have, pre-pandemic, we used to have live presentations. We had a few years ago, a woman who does bat rescues, and she's great. We used to have her come out to our Earth Day event. And she goes and rescues bats and rehabs them. And she's got some ambassador bats that she brings to her presentation. So unfortunately, the pandemic has kind of squashed that a little bit. We have a couple of weeks ago, we had a butterfly wildflower walk and hike at Wokaiba Springs State Park. So you could go out there and free event. In October 28th, which is a Thursday, I'm hosting a float trip on Rock Springs Run in northwestern Orange County. It's open to students. We have very limited seating available, but I don't think we're filled yet. And if I can try to find that link and post it in our chat too. So if you're interested in that, if not, I'll try to host another kayaking trip later this semester. So we do a variety of different things to try to educate people and also try to get them out and see the river and appreciate it and have fun. The spring tends to get a lot of people, especially on the weekends. It gets really, really crowded, but there are other parts of the state park and the natural areas around that people don't go to, that don't realize that they are there. There's a lot of history there. And we try to, again, educate people and raise their awareness of what's going on. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So that thank you for sharing all of these techniques that your organizations are using to try to solve some of the issues, or at least attack them a bit. Gives us a lot more hope than the first question did. Now let's talk a little bit about organizational collaboration. So the third question, going in the chat now, is how are your organizations working together or with other groups on local environmental issues? And maybe in the interest of time, you could each provide just one example so that we can, keep things rolling a little bit. So we've been kind of going in order. Maybe we can just stick with that. And Caroline, if you can think of one, go ahead and share.
Yeah, so there's a lot. I mean, every month we're connecting with different groups to do, tree plantings with like Conservation Florida, One Tree Planted, solar installations with ESA Renewables, Ellie Rigby, 10 light years or 15 light years, I'm sorry. Food, we work with different groups. We love to support other local farms like Winter Park Urban Farms. Waste, we've worked with Eco Preserve and other leaders in waste like O-Town Compost and Ecology, Florida Native Plant Society groups, etc. So for us, it's every single project is partnered with a local nonprofit, business, foundation, from a funding level or from a hands-on volunteering level. And I think that's the way that we can kind of, drive the most impact is by working with other groups. We worked with CLEO before, and of course, all the local schools, UCF, Rollins, Valencia, of course. So yeah, there's a lot of different collaborations that we can have. And if you have a group that would like to volunteer or work with us on a project, you can reach out to us at ideasforus.org.
Awesome, thanks.
Christy. Cool, yeah. So as Caroline mentioned, O-Town Compost does work with Ideas for Us, specifically fleet farming, because we donate a lot of our finished compost to fleet farming to help support them. In addition, O-Town Compost also tries to partner with the city as well, Orlando, because the city has zero waste goals that it's trying to achieve. So we're doing our best to work with them and help contribute to that and really develop a public-private partnership to really address the bigger buildings and organizations that could be composting. And then as for Fridays for Future Orlando, we're all about networking and all about forming coalitions with other environmental organizations. So we work with Ideas for Us quite extensively. And we've also worked with CLEO, as Markel mentioned, with the climate emergency declaration campaigns. Fridays for Future Orlando worked really closely with CLEO to get Orlando to declare a climate emergency. And that was about a year ago now. Last November, they passed a resolution declaring a climate emergency that they would commit to taking action at the scale needed. And so that was a really big win for us. And we've also been networking and working with other local organizations like Sierra Club that's has their Coal to Clean campaign and is really trying to get the environmental justice side of transitioning away from coal and reducing the coal ash that affects the health of those local communities. And so all about working with other organizations and constantly jumping on campaigns with other local organizations.
Awesome. Thank you. Markel.
Yeah, so yeah, I can just echo, Jen CLEO's worked with Fridays for Future, with climate strikes and obviously the climate emergency declarations, but also one organization we've been working with in Tallahassee is Rethink Energy, Florida. So kind of working to promote renewable energy mitigation policies. And in Tallahassee, there's a power plant that's uses fossil fuels. We've been trying to have it decommissioned, and we've been also working with a solar power energy plant. So recently in Tallahassee, there have been a bunch of solar panels installed by our local airport, and that's one of the renewable energy changes we're seeing in my city. And then we also work with local schools. So that's actually how I got involved with Jen CLEO, because of a presentation that happened at my high school. So partnership with schools is really important because that's where the education comes in, because there was no climate education for me during my K through 12 experience. I was honestly not very aware of how serious climate change is until much later in my high school years. So that's definitely really important. And then just working with community organizations. So there's a Southside, I can't remember the name. There's a local organization on the south side of Tallahassee. And the south side of Tallahassee is a very, it's a low income area, predominantly minority. So working with the like disadvantaged groups of people in my city to ensure that there's access to food, so like the vegetable gardens, as I mentioned before, but also ensuring that there are, like health safeguards, and then just encouraging, like increasing accessibility for low-income and people of color to connect with their representatives, because there's a perception that our legislators are very inaccessible. So we're trying to change that narrative and ensure that these people have their voices heard. And so those are just a couple examples I can share.
Awesome, thank you. Jen.
Yeah, Friends of the Wokaiba River, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary. So we've had a history of partnering with other organizations. St. John's Riverkeeper is one of those. It's an organization based out of Jacksonville that basically, they have the same mission as we do, but they look at the whole St. John's River, of which Wokaiba River is one tributary. A few years ago, one of our biggest successes was we partnered with Florida Spring Council, 1,000 Friends of Florida, to get the Land and Water Amendment passed to the Florida Constitution. I think that was 2014 or 2016. But anyway, it's basically an amendment to the Constitution that would allow a certain amount of real estate taxes. I'm not a legal expert, a certain small percentage of them, but it ends up being a large amount of money to be used to purchase and conserve land and water resources for future generations. And unfortunately, that amendment by the state legislature has been misinterpreted. So it's been tough to get the funding, even though we now have an amendment to the Constitution. So other things we do, we routinely work with Florida Springs Council and some other organizations. We were involved in a lawsuit a few years ago, unfortunately not successful, against Florida DEP to try to get some more protections in place. And I would open it up at this point and say, as relatively new president of the organization, I would welcome opportunities to partner with any of you on ideas and projects that you might have. One thing that comes to mind on the composting is that it's very difficult for homeowners in the Wokaiba Basin to compost because we have bears. And so if I try to compost in my yard, I'm going to attract bears, and that's not a good thing because it what we call habituates bears, thinking that people are the sources of food. So I don't know if that's something maybe we can kind of reach out to homeowners in the basin and let them know about your organization. So yeah. Thank you.
Great. That sounds like a wonderful potential project, and I hope you all
Yeah.
connect on that after this. Jim and Markel, you both mentioned legislation, and we all know that's a really important part of actually making change. So that leads me to the fourth question I have for you in the chat. What could our local government officials do to help solve these environmental issues? And I know we could probably do a whole presentation just on this one question, but let's hear some of your ideas.
Yeah, I think a big one is energy, and related to energy and not having a reliance on, natural gas and coal and fossil fuels. And that's something that directly, leadership, Buddy Dyer at, the city of Orlando, who works with, OUC, can make a stand about. With Fridays for Future Orlando, we were trying to push for renewable energy by 2030. And the plan that we currently have for 2050, it doesn't look too good. And it's all, it's all up to our leadership to say what we will and we will not stand for. And unfortunately, there's different ways of marketing that you could communicate to the public that, oh no, this is great, this is a great thing. But I think we really need to hold our leadership accountable and hold our, utility companies accountable to say, actually it's not, it could be better. And having less of a reliance on natural gas, switching to solar storage, it's just a no-brainer for Florida. It is. So that's a big one for us. Also, our leadership is the Director of Sustainability for the City of Orlando, Chris Castro, and the Director of Sustainability for Orange County, Jeff Benavidez. And what they're doing is they're leading in their own ways on the city and county level to have more sustainable, rules and leadership to expand, what our energy consumption with our buildings, have in our city, to have more solar charging stations for our electric vehicles. There's just so much, and it really takes action from people holding accountable, these sometimes older systems of government, bringing them to the 21st century with public interest. Right? We are all using our voices to put pressure on our local government to say that we want more sustainability. We want more renewable energy. We want water conservation. We want native lands. We want a heavy price on when trees are removed from a property, right? These are all things. We want a fertilizer ordinance that is, relative to the amount of water that we are having during our rainy seasons that we don't need to have rushing out into our waterways. So I think that it's a part of everybody joining together with organizations like everyone mentioned here to do something about it, and to make a big commotion about, because it's our voices that are driving local government. So yeah.
All right, thanks.
That was awesome. Yeah, I agree with everything Caroline just said. And since she mostly covered what I would say about Fridays for Future, I'll talk about O-Town compost. So local governments can definitely support things like O-Town compost by issuing permits we need to collect the food scraps, and really supporting these small businesses that are going to do this work efficiently and locally. So the city composting program is great because it's a free service. There are drop-off locations at farmers markets for composting, and some businesses and other organizations can request a curbside bin from the city for collecting food scraps. But the thing is, it's not quite as efficient as we at O-Town Compost are. They do send those food scraps a few hours away, so they do have to truck all those food scraps pretty far away, and that contributes to emissions and doesn't really help with cutting down on emissions in that regard. And we're definitely a convenient service as well. So individuals, I want to address what James said about the individuals versus the corporations. I totally agree what you were saying. We definitely have to work on both fronts. We do have to work on the individual front and changing the way people consume, especially in developed countries like America, where we consume way above what our Earth can sustain. But we also do have to work on those systemic issues. So it's doing both at the same time. And if it means we can convince people to be more sustainable as individuals, that's great. And if it also means that we can work towards the systemic issues, that's also great. And so with O-Town compost, it's really getting support from the city to really help develop that Central Florida's food waste recycling infrastructure, because that's what's really going to help reduce all of that organic waste that is going to the Orange County landfill. And I just want to quote a few more statistics about O-Town compost. So we've already kept, in the 1 or 2 years that we've been running, we've already kept over 120 tons of food waste from going to the landfill. And currently we have over 400 subscribers, and that's mostly individuals, and we come to their residential addresses to help pick up their food scraps. And so we love that more and more people are subscribing and joining this composting community. And I think that's really kind of the grassroots movement building that's gonna help us get the attention from our local governments to really see that this is something that people want. Is they want to individually go green, but they also want their local governments to implement this infrastructure. And so one more thing, we are also going to be partnering with Four Roots Farm of the Four Rivers restaurant chain, and they're building a farm campus in Orlando that's gonna be our new composting site, and that's going to be open and available for visitors to come see and learn about local agriculture and composting. So that's another way we're partnering with local organizations. So I'll leave it there.
That is very exciting. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, legislation. I feel like that's a big part of really making changes from like the top down, but also the bottom up is really important. So, talking to your social circles about how they can, maybe reduce their meat consumption, because that's a really big part of, like methane emissions, especially with like beef and everything. But one thing I've kind of, as I've been working to have the climate emergency declaration passed in Tallahassee, is it can be kind of difficult sometimes, enacting legislation, because everything, gets kind of political. And so, but I think it's important to recognize that the mitigation efforts that we take now, it's more economically, efficient if we, in the long term, if we, make those changes now. But not every politician's gonna or recognizes that. But so yeah, energy I think is important. In Tallahassee, we have a couple electric buses, but we are trying to ensure that we have like fully electric buses by 2035, and then also solar panels. One idea myself and some of my other youth advocates had was to try to have solar panels on top of like bus stops to kind of collect some energy from that, and then also having like solar charging stations, as Caroline mentioned. So there's, I think, lots of ways that we can rethink how we have renewable energy, or just even adapt in our cities. I think like having more green city layouts is really important, like having green space, keeping green space available, because in urban areas, if there's if we only have like concrete, like dark buildings, that's going to trap a lot of the heat and create just like warmer cities, which is not what we want. And then in the climate emergency declaration, we're trying to have a chief equity officer, because equity is really important from a social justice and environmental justice side. So people of color, lower income people with lower socioeconomic status, it's going to be really important that we ensure that there's equitable transitions and adaptability measures for people as we move towards adapting and just being more resilient in the climate change movement, because as I've mentioned before, it's the people who are contributing the least to the climate crisis that are going to be most affected. So it's really important that we ensure that everybody's taken care of in an equitable manner. I think that's all I wanted to mention, but I think it's just important that we make our representatives work for us, because that is their job. We elect them, and just being more civically engaged I think is important, and there's a lot that we can do at a local level for mitigating issues related to the environment and the climate crisis.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo what everybody else said because they made excellent comments. Particularly on a state level, the land and water conservation that I mentioned earlier is still seriously underfunded. If you came to our panel discussion last night, Senator Linda Stewart was talking about it, and she would like to get $300 million in funding for that, which is what should be available from that real estate docs tax. But the most they've ever gotten is $100 million, and that's a big win compared to what it's been in the past. And they've mismanaged the money in the past. I remember the first couple of years that it was in effect. I remember they were wanting to use the money for park ranger salaries, which is a great use of money, but that is not what those funds were intended for. And I think there was even a proposal to use some of the money to build a road, which is like the antithesis of what those funds are used for. So it does take letters, emails, whatever you can do to contact our state legislators and try to make sure that they are held accountable for this. And some of them are awesome, some of them are fantastic, and others need to hear from their constituents. Or on a local level, as what's mentioned before, fertilizer ordinances would be great. Again, getting people off of septic systems is a big issue because they can, that contaminates our drinking water that we all use. And what Markel said about urban areas and low-income communities and people of color. There was a recent study that was done that shows that there's something called an urban heat island effect, which is basically urban areas tend to get hotter than the surrounding rural areas because of all the concrete, the machinery, the lack of vegetation. And low-income communities are hit worse by the urban heat island effect than other communities are because the buildings tend to be closer together. They tend to be more densely packed. And that's going to drive up, it's not only uncomfortable and a health risk, but it drives up, electric uses and electricity costs for the residents in those areas. So planting more trees would help, and solar panels on roofs, of these buildings. Not really my area of expertise. So I'm not sure I have much to offer in the way of solutions, but just pointing out the issues. So, yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Those are a lot of great ideas, and I hope I wish our government officials could be here listening to this, but maybe they'll watch the video. Let's hope so. Okay, lightning round. Question number 5, 1 minute each. What can you say to attendees who want to get more involved in your organization's efforts?
Okay, Ideas for Us. Go to our Facebook, Ideas for Us Orlando. Under the events tab, we have everything listed that we offer to the community. If you want to get involved in urban agriculture, you want to come out and farm with us, Fleet Farming on Facebook as well. Under the events tab, we have everything. If you want to contact me for anything, you want to do a tree planting or any sort of project that I mentioned, you can email me at admin@ideasforus.org, ideasforus.org. As well, we have an edible landscaping service called Edible Landscapes. So we build raised beds, fruit fords, fruit tree orchards, maintenance, education, and more. And you can reach out to us at fleetfarming.org to schedule a free consultation to get edible landscaping on your property. Now offering native landscaping as well. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yay. So I would say subscribe to O-Town Compost if you are in our service area, and you can find those zip codes that we serve on our website, otowncompost.com. And then also, or if you can't subscribe, if you're not in the service area, or you can, I would recommend starting to compost in your backyard if you also want to do that on your own. And then also joining Fridays for Future Orlando, following us on Facebook and Instagram. And also you can see more information on our website that I believe was posted in the chat. If you want to join our weekly climate strikes or just get involved in terms of learning more about the climate crisis and joining me on my journey of making music videos and parodies. If you're musically inclined in any way, you can reach out to me. I'm going to drop in the chat a link to one of the music videos I made for one of our climate emergency declaration campaign for Orlando. So I'm going to put that in next.
Awesome. That was going to be my question after this question. So thank you. Okay, Markel.
Yeah, so for CLEO, you can follow CLEO on Facebook and then Instagram, and then you can go to the website, cleoinstitute.org, and there's a lot of information about how you can get involved if there's a local chapter in your area, or if you're interested, you can start a local chapter. You could even start a campus chapter at Valencia College if you're interested. So definitely reach out. You can reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat, and then you can also reach out to your like the contact person for your area. And I think social media, yeah, definitely follow social media. Sign up for the listserv too, because there's lots of information about events and action items that you can participate in. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, same thing as everybody else said. Come to Friends of Wokaiba, look at our website, which is I think in the chat, and also follow us on social media. Learn about our events. Again, we got the kayaking event coming up on October 28th, I believe. I put the link in the chat for that. And please, we got some. Sometimes we'll have some volunteer events or something like that. If you're interested, yeah, let me know. I can put my email address. I usually use my personal email address for Friends of the Wokaiba River, so I'll put that down if you're interested.
Okay, great. And
Yep.
thank you so much to all four of you. This has been, I mean, this has been like information overload for all of us, I'm sure. And I have notes and websites and email addresses and links to check out. And I'm sure that all of our participants do as well. So if we were all in the room together, you'd be getting thunderous applause at this very moment. So I hope that you all know that we appreciate what you have shared with us today so much. The words I can't even describe. I've really appreciated being able to moderate this panel. I think it was wonderful. And thanks again so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Cassie, who's just a couple of things to say about the conference. And thank you very much again.
Thanks so much. Just want to echo Dr. Macon's thanks and appreciation to our panelists. And also thank you, Lisa, for moderating this and for your very thoughtful questions. So just a reminder that there is an upcoming session, the last session of the conference. If you're available at 11:30, I really strongly encourage you to attend this talk with Nate Douglas, who is the youngest person elected to the Orange County Water and Soil Board. So please think about joining that session. Also want to remind everyone of a couple things. So Instagram, Facebook, we talked a lot about connecting today with resources. So if you have any questions or want to just know more about the Office of Sustainability at Valencia, definitely check us out on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also email. All of the conference recordings will be available as well on the office's YouTube page. So if there's anything you missed, or if you want to just kind of look back on what was discussed, you'll be able to do that on YouTube. Just thank you so much again to everyone. Really appreciate you joining. I'm going to ask Carrie briefly if there's anything she would like to add.
That is it. Thank you, everyone. It was a great panel discussion.
Thanks. Hope to see you at the next session.
Thank you.